You're walking through unfamiliar terrain. The trees start to look the same. The path you thought you were following has disappeared. The sun is getting lower, no phone, no GPS, no compass, no map. Just you, and a landscape that suddenly feels much larger than it did an hour ago. For most of human history, this exact moment, the moment you realize you don't know which way is home, wasn't a mild inconvenience. It was one of the most dangerous situations a person could be in. One wrong turn could lead you into a predator's territory, days from the nearest water source, completely alone with no way to call for help because help didn't exist. So how did ancient humans navigate a world with no landmarks they could search on a screen, and somehow do it well enough that entire civilizations crossed oceans, deserts, and ice fields without ever getting permanently lost? The answer is more sophisticated than you'd expect. And the unsettling part is, the ability that kept our ancestors alive might be quietly disappearing from your own brain right now. Before compasses existed, the sky itself was the compass. Ancient humans tracked the sun's position throughout the day to hold a steady direction. At night, they used the stars, specifically the fixed point of Polaris, the North Star, which barely shifts position across the sky no matter the season or how many hours pass. This wasn't guesswork passed down as folklore. It was precise, testable knowledge. Nearly every indigenous culture on Earth independently developed some form of celestial navigation, which tells you something important. This wasn't luck. It was a survival skill so critical that humans across completely disconnected cultures arrived at the same solution. Polynesian wayfinders took this to an extreme that still stuns modern navigators. Using nothing but star positions, ocean swell patterns, cloud formations, and the flight paths of birds, they crossed thousands of miles of open Pacific Ocean and reached tiny specific islands with pinpoint accuracy in an ocean that covers roughly a third of the entire planet. No instruments, no written charts, just decades of trained observation, past master to apprentice. The Inuit faced a completely different problem. For months at a time in the Arctic winter, the sun barely rises. So they adapted. They read the prevailing wind direction and the patterns it carved into snowdrifts across the landscape, using the wind itself as a kind of permanent compass that worked even in total darkness. None of this knowledge was innate. It was taught, tested, and refined generation after generation, because a single failure to read the sky correctly could mean never making it home again. Long before paper maps existed, the land itself was memorized in extraordinary, almost unbelievable detail. Native American trackers were documented by 19th century military officers as having what looked like photographic memory for terrain. One officer wrote that every hill, every rock formation, every cluster of bushes held meaning for these trackers. Permanent, cataloged landmarks that, once seen, were remembered for life. Picture that for a moment. Not just knowing the general direction of home, but holding a mental catalog of thousands of individual landscape features, each one instantly recognizable, each one part of a living map stored entirely in memory. This wasn't a rare gift limited to a few gifted trackers. It was baseline survival literacy, the same way reading and writing are considered basic skills today. Everyone needed this ability because everyone's life depended on it eventually. And there's a deeper reason this skill became so refined. Maintaining contact with distant family groups and trading partners across dozens, sometimes hundreds of miles of wilderness was essential to survival. If your local area ran out of food, you needed to know exactly where to travel to find help. Getting lost didn't just risk your own life, it could sever your entire support network, the very thing keeping your whole community alive. Here's where this stops being just a historical skill and becomes something biological. The human brain contains a region called the hippocampus, directly responsible for building mental maps of our surroundings. And remarkably, this part of the brain can physically grow and reshape itself based on how much it's used. In a now famous study, researchers scanned the brains of London taxi drivers, professionals required to memorize the city's notoriously complex, non-grid street layout, a task so difficult it can take years of study to pass the qualifying exam. The results were striking. Their hippocampi were measurably larger and denser than the average person's brain. This wasn't a difference they were born with, it was a difference their brains built through years of forcing themselves to navigate without shortcuts, which raises an uncomfortable question. If constant navigational practice physically grows this part of the brain, what happens to people who never practice it at all? We now have a clear answer, and it isn't reassuring. Modern studies have found that using GPS for just a few hours can measurably impair short-term navigational ability. The brain, given a shortcut, simply stops doing the work it used to rely on. And when modern humans do get lost without a device to guide them, The results can be genuinely disturbing. Search and rescue researchers have documented a strange, remarkably consistent pattern. Without a fixed landmark to correct their course, most people don't walk in a straight line, even when they're certain they are. They walk in circles, sometimes for hours, completely unaware it's happening, burning through energy and daylight while covering almost no real distance at all. Now compare that to ancient wayfinders, capable of crossing open ocean or frozen tundra for days at a stretch, constantly self-correcting using nothing but sky, wind, and memory. The gap between those two outcomes isn't intelligence, and it isn't some genetic advantage ancient humans had that we've lost. It's practice. It's a skill nearly every human being once possessed as a baseline requirement for survival, and one that most of us today have functionally lost entirely, traded away for a blue dot on a screen. So here's the real question. If your phone died right now in unfamiliar terrain with no signal and no map, what would you actually do? Ancient survival wisdom offers a few core principles that still hold up today. First, stop moving the moment you realize you're lost. Panic and continued movement is exactly what causes the circling pattern researchers keep documenting. Every additional step in the wrong direction makes the eventual return harder. Second, look up before looking around. The sky was always the most reliable, unchanging reference point available, long before any landmark on the ground. And third, this one might be the most important. Ancient survival depended on knowledge being taught and practiced long before it was ever needed in an emergency. Nobody successfully navigated using the stars for the first time while already lost and panicking. It was a skill built through years of ordinary, low-stakes practice. Which means the real modern danger isn't getting lost. It's the fact that most of us have never practiced the skill of not being lost until the exact moment it's too late to start. So the next time your phone dies and you're not sure which way home is, remember this. Your ancestors didn't just survive this exact situation. They mastered it completely, using tools no more advanced than the sky above their heads and the ground beneath their feet. Do you think you could actually navigate without a map or GPS? Be honest. Let us know in the comments, and subscribe for more on how ancient humans survived a world without any of the tools we take for granted today.